Chapter 2. The Spell. "What's up with Dad?" Aubrey asked his mother as they did the shopping one rainy Saturday afternoon. "His face is like a sinking moon." "He's just a bit worried," Suzanne said. "He could do with some cheering up." "What's he worried about?" Suzanne shook her head. "He's not really sure. He's not sleeping much at night." "Is that why he's sleeping today?" "Yes. We need to make sure he eats well, sleeps and takes lots of exercise. So if he asks you to go for a walk, do go. And if he doesn't, you ask him, would you, darling? It's just what he needs." "Sure," said Aubrey. Suzanne was a nurse, a very good one, and what she said was true. When people are worried, food, sleep, exercise and kindness are exactly what they need. But Suzanne could not know that her husband was falling under a spell, a horrendous spell of tremendous strength and power. Aubrey, Suzanne and Jim all knew something was wrong, but they had no idea what it was. "Okay, Dad?" Aubrey and Jim were walking to school. Normally, Jim would be looking at the trees, at the clouds, at the birds and at Aubrey and chatting away about everything. Jim was the sort of English teacher whose jacket is sometimes a bit scruffy, whose shirts are old and comfortable rather than sharp and new, whose hair occasionally looks more happy than neat, and who loves telling stories. He was not a man to miss anything interesting, and everything was interesting to him normally. But this morning he was looking at his feet, although all he wanted to do was watch his shoes walking down the lane. Oh, yes, fine." "You don't look fine," said Aubrey. "Don't I?" "You look like a man wearing a heavy hat." Jim smiled and squeezed his shoulder. "That's exactly right," he said. "That is how I feel, like a man wearing a heavy hat. I'm sure it'll pass. It's probably just the summer ending and going back to work." "But you love work. You love teaching." Jim sighed. "I do normally. It's just this heavy hat." On the way back from school, as they walked up the lane, Aubrey took a long look at Jim. His father's face was pale and tense. His gaze seemed empty. It was as though his eyes stared into his own mind and saw only sad thoughts there. "How's the heavy hat, Dad?" Aubrey asked quietly. Jim looked down at him and swallowed. Aubrey could see his father struggling with what to say next. "It's still there," he said huskily. "And there's something else." "What?" "There's a feeling in my stomach." "What's it like?" "It's like, you mustn't worry, Aubrey boy. It's just a feeling. Feelings pass, you know." "I know," Aubrey exclaimed. "But what does it feel like?" "It's like a hairy worm," his father said quietly. And as he said it, he looked frightened. The next morning, and the morning after that, Suzanne drove Aubrey to school. "Dad's still not feeling well," she said. "He's having another day in bed." Aubrey had expected this. He had overheard Suzanne asking Jim how he felt that morning. Jim said he felt horrendous. "Is it the hairy worm and the heavy hat?" She nodded. "Yes. And the panicked bird." "What bird?" "He says it feels as though he has a panicked bird in his chest trying to get out." "Is that why he feels horrendous?" "Yes, darling, that's right." Aubrey took a deep breath. "So can you cure him, Mum?" He knew his mother could cure pretty well anything. He watched her face, hoping for her reassuring smile. It was such a beautiful, calming smile that Suzanne's patience felt better just for seeing it. But that smile did not come. Instead, her mouth bent into a frown, and her head gave a slow half shake. "It's very difficult," she said. "If he had a germ or a virus or a wound or a disease, I could help him, but it isn't any of those. We just have to look after him and be very gentle with him until he comes out of it, and we have to be cheery and optimistic, okay?" "Okay," said Aubrey, with a cheerfulness he did not really feel. "Good boy," said his mother. "Such a good boy. You are wonderful at being cheerful and optimistic." After school, the first thing Aubrey did was run upstairs to see his father. He found Jim out of bed, half-dressed, wearing old trousers, one of his best shirts and one sock. "Hello, Aubrey boy." His father's lips made a shape which looked as though he was trying very hard to smile. "Hello, Dad. Are you feeling better?" "Sort of," his father said. "I can't seem to decide what to wear." "Are you going out?" "No, just coming down to make supper, I think. Or is your mother making it?" And that was the start of the indecisions. Over the next few days, Jim made indecision after indecision. If you asked him whether he wanted tea or coffee, he could not tell you. It was as though he made haphazard guesses instead. He repeated the question, tea or coffee, as though he'd never heard the choice before. Then he came out with, tea, please, if you're having some more coffee, which was not very helpful, and poor Jim knew it. Dad? Yes? Would you rather play in the garden or walk in the wood? Jim looked agonised. Different expressions ran over his face, as if he wanted to play in the garden and walk in the wood at the same time. And at the same time he did not want to walk in the wood or play in the garden at all, but felt that he ought to do one of them because Aubrey wanted to, and so was trying to work out which one Aubrey would like most, when all Aubrey had asked him was which one he wanted to do. Asking Jim what he wanted for supper, lunch or breakfast was a great mistake. He simply had no idea. When he dressed, he chose his clothes strangely and looked miserable in them. He stayed in bed a great deal, curled up as though he was cold. He said sorry a lot, apologising for being tired, for being sad, for being lost. But no matter how many times you said it was fine, he didn't have to say sorry. Jim kept seeming sorrier and sorrier and sadder and sadder. Soon Jim's pale face and wobbly eyes made him look like a ghost who has spooked himself in the mirror. He took a second week off work, but instead of recovering his bounce, he seemed to lose every scrap of it. His zip was gone. There was no sign of his zing. You would have thought he'd never had a spring in his step. Sometimes he seemed so wispy he might have been made of mist. Suzanne took him to the doctor, of course. The doctor said there was nothing physically wrong with him. The problem was in his thoughts. He's unhappy, but he doesn't know why. You could call it the blues or the glums, Suzanne explained to Aubrey. It happens to lots of people. They just feel very sad. But they get better. He'll get better if we look after him. He needs food and rest and love. Aubrey nodded, but he was not really listening to this stuff about blue gums. His father's gums weren't blue, they were pink. He was quite surprised his mother had missed that, but he was too busy to worry about it. He was working out what to do about the horrendous spell.